Hello there, my name's Adam and welcome to the very first of my new videos, all about things in a nutshell, to share some knowledge that I've gathered about things, but to really abbreviate into a small package you can take away with you and do with what you will, whether it be used for educational purposes, to show off to other cool people, emphasis on cool, other cool people at parties, or to simply try and chat someone up with maybe. Could work. Okay, right. Today is all about Henry VIII and his 6 wives. That's the very first subject I'm going to address. Henry VIII and his 6 wives. A lot of dates, a lot of information, a lot of things to cover. I'm really going to try and box it all and give you as much as possible. You can do with what you will. Okay, so first things first. Let's start with some Tudor music. Actually, here we go. Tudor music. Yes, it's like being in Game of Thrones, 15th century style. Okay. First things first, Henry VIII is born in 1491. In 1509, he marries, at the age of 18, his very first wife, the first wife, Catherine of Aragon. Now, she is a Spanish princess, okay? Spanish princess. Back then, beginning of the 16th century, Spain is a massive country. It's really powerful, loads of money, they've got loads of cash, and they've got a lot of power. Power was everything back then. Back then, it was all about marrying into other royal families, creating a real lineage, a real kind of a tour de force. In the world, and she was a perfect fit. Now, Catherine of Aragon had previously been married to Henry's brother Arthur. Now, that didn't work out. He sadly passed on, and they actually got a papal dispensation from the Catholic Church in Rome saying, "Do you know what, guys? Do you know what? God says it's cool. God is cool with it. You can get married. God's cool." They did. They got married, and straight away, the first thing they had to do was try and have a baby. They had to have a baby. That was the main thing. There was hunting and there was eating lots of big food. There was, for Henry, there was a load of mistresses. You see, the Tudors and the Stuarts, they've been having this huge feud in England over who had the right to the throne for a long time. The Tudors had come into power. The first thing they had to do was have a baby boy as well. Baby boy being very important. They lived in a primogeniture world where whatever happens, regardless, girl or boy, the firstborn, secondborn, thirdborn, whatever, the boy, the firstborn boy, is always the first in line to the throne. Girls were, to use a better phrase, total rubbish. So they try and have babies, Catherine of Aragon and Henry. Eventually, they do have a baby. Yes, 1516. It's only taken 7 years. They have their baby. What do they have? It's a girl. Shit, it's a girl. Queen Mary, otherwise known as Bloody Mary, is her name, and she is actually she's their first fully fine baby. She's perfectly healthy, but Henry is peeved, man. He's really annoyed because it's not a boy. He needs a boy. By this point, he's growing very tired of his wife Catherine of Aragon. They've been together for a very long time. She's an older lady. He's a young guy. He can see all these other prospects on the horizon. He's kind of done, and he wants another divorce. What does he do? He goes back to Rome and goes, "Hey, I want another divorce, please. I would love one. What does God say?" And they were like, "No." They didn't want give him a divorce. They didn't think it was right because there's no reason to get divorced. There's absolutely no reason whatsoever. Henry gets really annoyed. He doesn't stick around. He does what we'd all do in the same situation if it was the 16th century. Made up his own church. Why not? He made up the Church of England. It became his own religion that he made. Him being the head of his own church, he gave himself a divorce, and that was it. Catherine and him went separate ways. 1509 to 1533, Catherine of Aragon and Henry VIII. Right, so on to wife number 2, Anne Boleyn, 1533 to 1536. Now, Anne is kind of she was a very attractive girl. Well, these days she'd be seen as very attractive here in the 21st century. She was kind of a bit pasty, quite skinny, looked a bit like Natalie Portman of the Tudor times. She was quite a cutie, but back then, not so much. It wasn't really seen as her being attractive. But still, she was someone who really caught Henry's eye. And now, Mary Boleyn, who was Anne's sister, had actually been one of Henry's mistresses. And they'd fooled around a bit. She was a bit of a hussy, a bit of a floozy. Anne was like, "Mister, if you want some of this, you are going to have to work for it. You're just going to get this. You have to marry me, and then we'll be sorted." Henry loved playing hard. He was playing hard to get shenanigans. He loved it. He was all over it. Mustn't forget as well with the whole church thing. I mentioned this earlier on the Catholic Church side of things, not being very forthcoming with divorce here, and Henry forming his own church. Back in the 16th century as well, Westminster Abbey in London, where William and Kate got married, was the home of the Catholic Church in London. It's actually called the Collegiate Church of St. Peter's. That's its official name. Now, once that Henry had been done with the Catholic Church, he obviously couldn't use that church. He had to use somewhere else for the C of E Church, and he chose St. Paul's. Now, the Catholic Church has always been renowned for being very, very wealthy. Very, very wealthy. He all the kind of like the wealth and the power and the treasure that was in Westminster Abbey, he took everything. He took everything out of there, he got it all and took it somewhere else. He took it from that Westminster Abbey over to St. Paul's. That being called the Collegiate Church of St. Peter's, this is where we get the phrase, he took from Peter to pay Paul. That's where we get the phrase from. It's pretty cool, right? They were trying for children, and Anne had a stillborn son. A stillborn son, damn it! But then had another baby, and it was a girl! Bugger! It was a girl! Elizabeth I. If you've seen Blackadder, you'll know exactly who Elizabeth I is. She was a really notoriously brilliant queen. But back then, once again, she wasn't a boy, and this caused a lot of problems. Henry is getting really annoyed at this point. He's got a very short temper. He's getting very, very upset. Anne's been very smart in the time they've been together, Anne Boleyn and he. She's got a lot of powerful friends in powerful places. You see, it wasn't all about money, it was about power. And power was in like the courts, people like in the lands, like landowners. It was all those kind of people. She had made sure to really embed herself in that kind of world to make her not the most, disposable of women. So what do they have to do? They actually came up with an idea. One of Henry's closest mates and the minister in England here was Thomas Cromwell. And Thomas Cromwell was like, I've got a plan. And his plan was, let's basically accuse her of all this kind of crap so that everyone goes, oh yeah, man, she stinks. I hate her. Yeah, she sucks. I hate Anne Boleyn. That was basically the plan. So there are a bunch of different things that she was accused of. One of which was high treason. She was a traitor. She was a traitor first and foremost. Back then, being a traitor literally meant nothing apart from if you disagreed with the king. So if the king went, do you think this beef tastes good? And if you went, nah. Treason! You are treason, bitch! That's what they would have said. You are treason. You're high treason. You wouldn't have said you are treason. That's a bit of a weird thing to say, but high treason was disagreeing with the king. So that happened. She was accused of high treason. She was accused of being a witch. She had 6 fingers on one hand. Apparently this is folklore, and apparently she bewitched him with her vagina or something ridiculous. And also she was accused of the worst of all, of adultery and incest with her own brother George Boleyn. Horrific. Wasn't true. Now, who incriminated Anne and George in this? A lady called Jane Boleyn, George Boleyn's wife. Messed up, right? But it was bad. It was really bad. George is taken, tortured to buggery until he goes, I confess, it's all true, it's all true. Obviously it wasn't true, but he obviously was, he was in quite a lot of pain. There's some pretty bad contraptions back then to inflict pain. Anne was put into a cell, as with George. George was killed, and then Anne was told that she was to be beheaded. They said to her, "Do you know what? You've got to go." So she was taken. Henry was done. He didn't care either way, really. He wanted to get rid of her. Now he was done. She was too big for her own boots, basically. And the executioner in the Tower of London, this happened, one of the beheadings in the Tower of London, actually used a sword rather than an axe. A sword was seen as the more kind of honourable way of beheading someone back then. It's still beheading, let's be honest. But the axe was like, one of those things where it was a lot more brutal. The sword was used. He actually felt sorry for Anne, it said, while she was there, about to have her head taken, and he said, my sword, I can't find my sword, which made her turn her head to look at her ladies in waiting, and while that happened, that's when off with her head taken, put onto a spike on London Bridge. He then got the opportunity to marry his next wife, and his favourite wife, Jane Seymour. No, wife number 3, Jane Seymour. Jane was a beauty. She was absolutely awesome. He was well into her. She thought she was great. Golden hair, beautiful girl, quite petite, and actually happened to be one of Anne Boleyn's ladies in waiting. There's a real trend going here. Jane and him, what do? They get to trying to make babies straight away. And what do they have? Da-da-da-da! Boy! Come on! Edward VI, how are ya? How's your father? getting quite fat by this point, Henry was actually. But they have a boy. Absolutely elated. Henry is. He can't believe how good this is. He's totally blown away by it. He's got his boy that he always wanted. But during after Edward's birth, a few days later, I think it was 12 days later, Jane goes into a kind of a shock, a fever, and she passes away due to the kind of the difficulties of childbirth. He is mortified. He's absolutely mortified. He's lost his favourite wife. He loved her. And she's actually buried with Henry VIII in St George's Chapel in Windsor Castle. If you get a chance to go there, it's actually the home of where the Order of the Garter is the highest order of chivalry in the UK, is in that room in St George's Chapel. And right in the middle of the floor, you'll see a vault. There's a kind of a big black slab. She and he are in a vault, also buried with Charles II and a baby. Right, 1540 comes around. It's been 3 years since Henry's been with had a queen on his arm. He's kind of gotten over the Jane thing now. He's had a few girls in between, I'm sure. He's presented with a portrait of a German princess. Her name, Anne of Cleves, wife number 4. Anne of Cleves, German princess. Portrait. She looks ridiculously hot. Like he's well into it. He thinks she's gorgeous looking, and sees the portrait and she knows, you know what? I wanna be like Josh Corbett, the guy who was in Sandra Bullock's cupboard. He saw a picture and was like, yeah, I am in, man. I want some of that. And sent for her from Germany to come to London, and she arrived on the docks. And he went down to meet her on the docks. And apparently, it's said that the myth is that the moment that he saw Anne of Cleves at the docks in London, he had the portrait painter fired immediately. Apparently, she was an absolute horror show. She was nothing like he imagined. They called her a Flanders mare, which ultimately meant she had the face of a horse, like a horse person's face, like a horsey face. And she actually got quite lucky, you know. She got quite lucky. They were only married for 6 months. She got lucky. She got land. She got all the things that she wanted, and she survived, and she was fine. Taken away. And what actually happened was she was referred to at that point onwards to keep her close to the family as the king's sister. To keep her in the family as such, but not a wife, but still officially part of the Tudor massive, if you will. So that was that. And then he didn't have a wife again. 6 months. So what did he do next? He met his new wife, Catherine Howard, 1540 to 1541. She was an absolute sort. He loved. She was great. Like she was tiny. She was cute, bubbly, a little bit kind of like a little bit silly. When he was getting a bit older by this point. He was kind of roles were reversed with Catherine of Aragon. He was older now. Catherine Howard was a lot younger. Now, he was a bit of a lazy bum. He didn't really do much anymore apart from eat. And they had a wonderful time travelling around the country, living the dream, you know, doing their own thing. And they got to a point where there was a lot of rumours going around that Catherine was being a little bit unfaithful behind his back. Now, back then as well, I mentioned earlier about the kings being like the enforced kind of primogeniture one in the land. Kings could do what they wanted. They could have as many girlfriends, mistresses, you name it. They could do basically anything. But the girls could not. Girls could no way have boyfriends. That was out the question. There's no chance. There's no way. It was massively unfair, but that was the way things were. A lot of rumours circulating that Catherine was a bit rough around the edges, if you know what I'm saying. And one day, Henry is presented with categorical evidence she is definitely messing around behind his back. Definitely. He's gutted. He's another wife. How many bloody wives am I going to have? You know, he's gutted, but you know he's too old and too far gone to start messing around. Going, oh, I really like. He was like, nah, just get rid of her. So what does he do? He actually asks. He says, I want to have her killed. You know, she's messed around on the royal family. Let's get rid of her. She is denial until like the last night or two before she's actually said to have her head taken. She starts going, I'm sorry, you know, I did do it. Forgive me. By this point, he's done. And apparently, while she was actually in custody before having her head taken, in Hampton Court, she was there in Hampton Court, and she apparently her custody. She got away from her the wardens for a second. The guards ran down towards a chapel that Henry was praying in, banging and screaming on the door. Please don't kill me! Please don't kill me! And if you go to Hampton Court nowadays and you go into the palace, apparently at night you can hear her ghost screaming down the gallery as she runs towards the chapel to kind of tell Henry not to kill her. That was 1540 to 1541. 1543 comes round to 1547. Henry dies January 28, 1547. But before he does, 1543, he meets his sixth wife, Catherine Parr. Catherine Parr is the lucky survivor. She outlives Henry VIII. She's a good lady in the whole scheme of things, because she actually was a huge ambassador for getting Elizabeth and Mary, Henry's two eldest daughters, getting those two to be recognised as legitimate queens to the throne of England, which was out of the question at one stage, because the boys were so prevalent and they were so much more important. She was a real ambassador for that happening. Easy way to remember the Henry VIII's wives: divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. Let me know what else you'd like me to do, what other facts you'd like in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching. Henry VIII's Wives. Yeah!